Welcome, everybody. We're here today to talk about modernizing your mainframe and a pragmatic guide to doing that. My name is Brad Foster. I am the global head of the cloud portfolio for Atos. And with me today is Barry Wardell.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here. Again, Barry Wardell. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer in our cloud division inside of Atos. And myself, along with Brad, are going to take you through our mainframe migration story today. Thanks again for being here. So I want to take a moment just to share with you a bit about Atos. Atos is a 110,000 person company located in roughly 70 different countries across the world. Our expertise is in IT, data center outsourcing, as well as consulting, systems integration, and application development and management. We have a consulting and advisory practice that covers all spectrums of our business and technology areas. We have a significant background in infrastructure and hosting, which we'll talk more about today, as well as a great level of expertise in application modernization, which is a key part of our mainframe modernization journeys. And of course, we have a great public cloud and hybrid cloud transformation capability as well. So along with Atos, I want to take a moment to talk about the strong partnership that we have with AWS. Again, we're here to talk about mainframe modernization, and we're doing some really incredible things with AWS in that area. We also are co-developing cloud accelerators so that we can help our customers move faster. These accelerators are technology-driven as well as industry-driven. Cloud data analytics, AI, ML, is obviously top of mind for most of our customers. This is an area where we're spending a great deal of time, for example, studying, strategizing, and executing on the strategy of taking many disparate databases across the enterprise and bringing those into modern cloud platforms in AWS. Of course, IoT is a very popular and becoming a strategic area for most of our customers. 5G plays a big role here as well. What we're seeing is not only the advancement of services in the AWS Cloud Core, but now we're bringing those services to Cloud Edge, and we're using 5G to help us with that. And so we're essentially strategizing on where to make decisions or making decisions where the data is. Data center cloud to cloud is an important partnership area as well. The data center to cloud area is the exit of the exit of data center. And that's important because what this does is it creates a funding lever. So as we modernize many of our landscapes, we're helping to fund that through the free up of spend that was inside the data center walls. SAP to AWS is also a strategic area. Atos happens to maintain some of the largest SAP landscapes in the world, and we're doing that in partnership with AWS in a lot of areas. Of course, all of this is about increasing application agility for our customers. The whole story and realization of that agility is by bringing our workloads, our applications, and our data into AWS. And all of this, of course, is customer-centric and customer experience-driven. We have a number of specific capabilities with AWS, including our mainframe modernization practice, which is actually a marketplace offering, and we have other marketplace offerings with AWS as well. And we're also an advanced consulting partner. So it's a really great and powerful partnership that we have with AWS. So with that, I want to shift into the heart of the story, which is really mainframe modernization. If you're listening to this, then you're a stakeholder or have an interest in mainframe is our assumption. The relevancy of the platform is unquestionable. 67% of Fortune 100 companies continue to run mainframe systems. The top insurers, the top banks continue to run mainframe systems. The revenue, the majority of the revenue, or 65% of the revenue of these Fortune 100 companies, are traversing mainframe systems. So the platform continues to be highly relevant. And in fact, many of our application transactions today continue to be processed through mainframe systems. So very relevant area. But an area with challenges, which is what I'm sharing here. So, Brad, why don't you put on the hat of a customer and take us through some of the challenges that you hear from our customers today?
Yeah, thanks. And so I'll talk a little bit about this slide, and I think through the rest of the presentation, I'm going to play the pretend customer with Barry and interject some questions that we hear from a lot from companies as we're having these conversations and trying to tackle this problem. So I think that the first and just the mainframe today, as that we all know, the mainframes were built over decades, lots of code, very intertwined, very interdependent. The workforce is aging. There's just not a large amount of people who know COBOL or assembler and all of the technologies that are on the mainframe. So that's risk to the organization as those folks move on out of the workforce. And I think one of the biggest things also is the agility factor, because it takes a long time to make updates to a mainframe and its set of code. Businesses are losing on the agility aspect there. So you have this large mainframe application, and really, as the world moves forward, as those digital natives companies come to bear and are competing with the traditional Fortune 1000, everybody's moving towards this very microservices centric, very fast speed to market type of applications, everything driven and embedded with data and AI. Where you're able to respond to regulatory requirements more quickly, in all of the fast-changing world that we live in. COVID being the most recent example of us having to all adapt quickly to things that are happening in the world. So that's really what companies want, but yet they're straddled with this large mainframe investment, and it's not an easy journey to go forward. And so some of the key challenges we talked about is that you have this compounding complexity. It's kind of the situation where you pull on the thread of the sweater, and then all of a sudden the whole sweater just comes unraveled, and companies are scratching their head saying, how do I break this apart and move forward without this whole thing falling apart? To that point, there's a big fear of business disruption. These mainframes are sitting at the heart of most of the operations that a company is doing, whether you're transacting orders or executing critical nightly processes. These things are running major central operations for companies. And it's a difficult business case for change. If it was easy, people would have already done it. If it made sense to just modernize it all within 12 months and drop it all within AWS with a click of a button and some automation, mainframes wouldn't exist anymore. So we know it's not that easy. There's a financial kind of aspect of doing this and having ROI that Barry will talk a little bit about as well. The original builders are gone. I mean, we mentioned aging workforce. It's hard to find people that understand how to move COBOL to Java or et cetera. And finally, that data, we want to unlock data and move it into modern data platforms on AWS, apply AI, really advance the agenda with data. And oftentimes that data is really locked up inside a mainframe, and it's hard to get out and use in a more real-time fashion. So those are all these key challenges companies are facing. And that's really in these next few slides what Barry's going to start talking about, is how do we start overcoming those challenges and work with companies to do so, and work with AWS to do so. So Barry, I think the first question I have is where to start. I mean, most companies we talk to, obviously, it's a daunting challenge. How do you get started in this journey?
Yeah, thanks, Brad. And that brings us to the next page, and that's a really, really important part of the journey, is to ensure proper engagement. And for Atos and for AWS, it begins with business alignment. The business alignment, to establish that at the start of the journey, maintain that as a principle throughout the journey, and it is critical. Without that business alignment, it becomes a technology discussion, and that's generally where we face the biggest challenges. So from workshops to strategic planning sessions, establishing business alignment is the most critical part of the how it starts, or where do we begin. From business alignment, we'll establish business cases, architectures, We'll build a program with projects that is going to bring us through execution. And then we'll also have conversations and consult with organizational change management, because there's such an incredible amount of change that affects the organization as we shift these business processes and applications from the mainframe to modern cloud services, that there is an impact on the organization. So all of these things considered, they make up what is the modernization program. But from start to finish, business alignment is paramount. It's very, very important.
Yeah. So Barry, on that, and I would agree, as a pretend CIO trying to tackle this, my business is giving me immense pressure to modernize their operations, applications, etc. So much to the extent they want next quarter a result. They want me to choose some tools, move code, have that new application running. And so what's the risk if I just jump in and go do this in quote an agile fashion and kind of skip some of this planning? Like, what would be the risks in doing that?
Well, the biggest risk is misalignment with the business. The expectations and the sponsorship at the highest levels, or the decision-making parts of the organization, may not be there. And without that support and without that alignment with the business, it becomes a technology project. And that's where we run into issues, because we're changing the business. We're not just changing the technology. So it's a significant change. So while we all desire for that, rapid change and rapid impact, and there are ways that we can affect change quickly in some areas, we have to have business alignment, because if we don't have that, if we don't have the sponsorship from the business and the support of the business, then generally our ability to progress this through an end-to-end transformation is very much hindered.
Yeah, great. Makes sense. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. So with business alignment, the creation of a strong business case is a really, really important part of that conversation. This is where we need to entice and help support the business owners and the CIOs to grow the case to support the actual transformation. So we work hard to help with that business case. And as we begin that conversation, we share these numbers here. And it really starts with operational savings in year one, so that you do see some rather early savings as you begin your modernization journey. We typically see 25% savings in year one. That is through software optimization, which is reducing MIPS, and there's other optimization. And there's also a rehosting or a migrate capability as well, which is another cost lever, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But year one operational savings, or the reduced mainframe spend, is roughly 25%, and that is a good part of the early business case. Further to that, there's the data center cost, which is and reducing the data center cost by 100%. And that is through eliminating your data centers, which is often a strategy of our clients. And how do we do that? Well, historically, we haven't been able to exit some data centers because there's a mainframe and integrated systems. So by migrating your mainframe services into cloud, you're eliminating that platform, and then you're creating the ability to move those peripheral systems into cloud as well. So you are eliminating 100% of your data center cost. And then there's a 50% sustained operational savings. So as we transform the mainframe, the apps and the data, and get rid of all that expensive software cost, we are, during the transformation, and certainly at the end of the transformation, have created a sustained reduction in operational spend of 50% or more. It's essentially day one cost of mainframe versus a modern cloud environment with all of your applications there tomorrow. And then in terms of a value play, there's an incredible amount of agility to be achieved, an infinite amount of agility, one could say, by shifting what were tightly coupled, intertwined processes within the mainframe environment into cloud, which is obviously very open with many, many different services available. So the business case and helping our clients establish a strong business case is really an important part of that whole business alignment conversation.
Yeah.
So with that, I want to take a moment just to talk about the mainframe offers within Atos. We call it M3 for manage, migrate, and modernize. The manage phase is, as it sounds, it's really a walk-in takeover. It's optimization, as I mentioned earlier. And it's also a really, really important part of a mainframe journey in the sense that it gives Atos an opportunity to learn about that complex mainframe landscape. So think about the languages, the code base, the applications, the data, the interdependencies. Really, really important to understand that in great detail because that allows us to build a long-term, a transformational plan, which is going to increase our chance of success. So by going through a management phase, which is very typical for us as we work with our customers to begin here, we're learning about that landscape and building very successful plans. So it's actually an accelerator for our transformation. I mentioned a moment ago the mainframe hosting, or what we call migrate. And this is an optional service. This is an optional service wherein we can rehost our customers' mainframe platforms onto what we call the mainframe hub. And this is a series of mainframe environments in North America and in Europe that we use to rehost client environments. And you might ask, why would we move our mainframe to the mainframe hub when we're trying to go to cloud? Well, there are use cases for that. It's typically for clients that have a longer time horizon to transform their mainframe. They might consider migrating to hub to achieve some additional cost savings through efficiencies as part of their journey to cloud. And then finally, there's modernize, which is the third of the M3. And modernize is really where we want to bring, this is where we want everyone's attention because this is what makes the most impact. So the modernization, of course, is highly application and data focused and cloud transformation focused. It is what allows us to bring in the agility and the speed that our clients and the business leaders really, really want. And just as importantly, this is where we can achieve that sustained 50% operational cost savings. So this is the M3 that Atos delivers today.
And Barry, another question on this. Is this something that companies need to do kind of a 1, 2, 3 process that's always relatively the same, or is there a combination of these things that companies go? Could you explain a little bit about how structured does this have to be, or how flexible can it be?
Yeah, great question. And I get that question a lot. The M3 or the Manage, Migrate, and Modernize is not a sequential offering. And it doesn't mean that a client has to manage and then migrate and then modernize. It's not that at all. It is selective, and our customers can choose, any of these services. And some do. Some clients that or customers that we work with run a very, very efficient mainframe shop, but they need help with application modernization, right? And then we have other customers who realize, our mainframe spend is high versus our peers, and we want some help with some basic optimization, and they'll ask for our help to manage. And then there are other clients who simply want to re-platform or rehost their mainframe into an Atos, as we call it, the mainframe hub. So it's selective. It's not sequential. Any of our customers can choose any of these services. That's a great question.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. Okay, so I want to take a moment to talk about the mainframe transformation and the self-funding approach that Atos takes. What you can see here is a visual depiction of operational spend or operational savings versus transformational investment. The concept is really simple. No matter what the service is that Atos is helping our clients with, whether it's manage, migrate, modernize, we are achieving cost savings or run reduction in any or all those services. And the concept, again, is rather simple. We're shifting the savings from those from those operational efficiencies to fund transformational activities. And that's exactly what we're trying to do as we go through the entire transformational life cycle. And it's we call it the virtuous cycle, in the sense that, we have early optimization, which funds early transformation. And as we gain momentum and we're optimizing even further, as we're transforming more, we're achieving more cost savings, which is creating stronger or more funding for transformation. And that circle increases in velocity in terms of the transformation, until we get to the point where, in 3 or 4 years, or whatever the time frame is, we've completed that transformation. And that is what allows us to attain that 50% sustained operational savings, which can go right to your bottom line. So the message here is rather simple. We work really hard with our customers to identify all operational cost savings within the mainframe operating environment, shifting that into transformation funding, and then working that virtuous cycle until that transformation is complete.
Great. And another question on this. Some companies I know we've talked with want to run to full transformation as fast as possible. I mean, who doesn't, right? That's the ultimate goal. Can you speak a little bit about the business case for doing that or not doing that? I mean, if I just skip all of those previous steps, I don't maybe want a self-funding model. I mean, is there an option to have some ROI and fund this just going full in transformation right out of the gate?
Well, it's a good question. There's certainly the capability, the feasibility of committing to a full end-to-end transformation is there, in terms of rewriting your application or rescripting your business logic and rewriting your applications. That desire is certainly there, and that's entirely possible. However, I think the business case is stronger if you take a more varied, iterative approach that includes earlier optimization. So as we further this conversation, we talk about some of the modernization patterns, and I'm talking about emulation and code modernization. Those are some things that we can do to transform these environments early in the transformational cycle, that will free up or create those operational savings to fund the transformation. So in my view, it's better to take that iterative, phased approach in the transformation, because it creates funding for the transformation, which means a stronger business case. The end result is going to be the same. We're going to transform the environment, and we're going to rationalize the applications. But by doing so in a phased or an iterative approach, we can do so in a self-funded manner.
Yeah, great. Makes sense. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, so I'm going to shift into a little bit of the how. I want to start with physical use cases. So, how do we shift mainframe to AWS? Again, this is really more of a physical view. If you look at the top left of your screen, this is bringing the mainframe to AWS. So this is putting mainframe at AWS Cloud Edge. This, for example, is quite literally putting a mainframe in a co-location facility right next door to an AWS zone in a region. And it's the most popular, most flexible option. And the reason for that is because the performance is so good. And what I mean by performance is latency, which is always the challenge in the mainframe modernization world, is 2 milliseconds approximately. And it's as though you're putting a mainframe platform right inside of an AWS data center facility. So highly flexible, because you can move data and applications and tooling into and out of AWS as you see fit. You can work on dev and test. You can experiment, but it's highly flexible because there really are no performance limitations. Far and above putting a mainframe in a colo at the AWS Cloud Edge is the preference as we transform, because of the flexibility. But there are some other cases where we need to put the mainframe platform in a different location. So if you look at the top right, for example, I mentioned the Atos Mainframe Hub. And for those clients who host on the Atos Mainframe Hub, there's a 10 millisecond level of latency into AWS. And so any of those applications that can work well within that 10 millisecond time frame are great candidates for moving into AWS. Or if you look at the bottom left, the use of AWS local zones is another option. And why might that be an option? Well, if a client desires to move their mainframe into AWS, great, but they may continue to have some tight integration with their private data center. So in the case of in that case, we can put a mainframe in an AWS local zone, which is still next to a customer's data center. So we have in the same location or region, if you will, a mainframe, an AWS local zone, and a customer data. And so we've satisfied any of those latency or performance concerns in that case. And there are some clients who want to bring AWS services to their mainframe. Again, these might be clients with a long time horizon for transformation, or perhaps are doing some development and tests, or even want to begin to integrate their mainframe into a DevSecOps type of practice. So we can bring in an AWS outpost to the mainframe. So these are just some samples. There are other physical use cases. I would close here in saying that the bringing the mainframe to the AWS Cloud Edge is far and above the most preferred method.
Yeah, Barry, to that point, definitely some good options. It's not going to be as clear cut as we talked about in a couple of previous slides of everything just moves in one big phase to one of these states. So as companies are in a transitional state of some applications start to run in AWS, yet the data may still be in their on-prem data center, or data starts to become located in two places, and those applications in AWS need to pull data from the mainframe or interact and integrate with applications still in the mainframe. As they go through that kind of hybrid environment until they really are able to shut down the mainframe, how do these patterns really help them get through that and not disrupt their business?
It's a great question, and you're absolutely right. There is no singular approach to any of these modernization strategies because the environments are so unique. I'll tell you that by putting the mainframe at Cloud Edge, it allows us to mitigate any of the concerns that you brought up in terms of different data sets moving into or out of AWS, or different applications moving into or out of AWS. So we can move portions of the data from the mainframe into AWS, or we could mirror some of the data from the mainframe into AWS, or we might move some applications or a portion of the tooling into AWS. We can do that because with 2 milliseconds of latency, as I said, it's as though the mainframe is in that AWS data center. So it allows for a great deal of testing, experiments for some of our clients who want to do pilots and proof of concept type of activity. And frankly, there's little concern for moving a portion or all of the applications or data because there is generally no performance issue there at all.
Yeah, great. Makes sense. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. I want to shift into application modernization patterns. These are, again, samples of patterns that are popular with our customers as they embark on their own transformation journey. A couple of points. One, there is no one-size-fits-all approach here. As we think about mainframe modernization, we're consuming more than one of these approaches, whether it's emulation, code modernization, et cetera. Generally, these approaches are all complementary to each other. And so it's not as though we would ever recommend a singular approach to modernize a mainframe. It is a combination of options. And also, as we think about the modernization, we typically silo the data and the applications and the tooling or the third-party ISV software. And so as we think about those silos, data, apps, and tooling, there's also different modernization patterns that might apply. So, for example, we might use emulation for tooling, or we might use a refactor for data, et cetera. So as you think about your mainframe modernization, think about the fact that there's multiple modernization approaches that you can take, and also think about those data, application, and tooling silos, which will help drive your modernization patterns. With that, let me just quickly step through each of these more popular approaches. First is emulation. And emulation is as it sounds. It is emulating services like COBOL or CICS onto an emulation tool or technology that sits on EC2 on AWS, right? And it's considered generally a lower risk approach because the rate of change is much smaller. We're able to move faster because we're not making any code changes. We're simply emulating the functions that exist today. It's a very popular option because we can move rather quickly through the use of emulation. Lots of technology and tools that are available to do that as well. And then, of course, there's code translation or code modernization. And this is also a tooling conversation in the sense that we're using tooling and technology to automate the legacy code base, such as COBOL or assembler, into modern languages such as Java, .NET, C#. What's really important about this particular approach, the code modernization approach, is that it addresses that acute mainframe resource shortage that we have today. And so if you think about the lack of COBOL programmers, for example, which is a very real issue, if we modernize our code and bring that into Java, it's obviously a lot easier to find Java resources than it is COBOL resources. So code translation does address, in many ways, the ability to move fast and address that acute labor issue. Another option is replaced with COTS. So if you think about a mainframe that is processing large financial transactions, for example, obviously there are some COTS packages that can support that, and it's a viable approach. One thing to bear in mind, of course, is that we have to go through a business rules study and extraction to really understand how that financial application, as an example, is behaving today, and mapping that into the requirement for the COTS package tomorrow. So that's another approach. There's also the platform enhancement approach. This, again, would be a situation, particularly for those clients who have really complex or long time horizon views on their mainframe modernization. So it's about opening up the mainframe using technologies like API abstractions, for example, so that we can consume AWS services from the mainframe, and AWS services can consume from the mainframe. So a bidirectional approach. And this is very effective for unlocking some of the value of the data that sits in the mainframe today. Application refactor is another approach. And the application refactor is highly transformative in the sense that you're refactoring, for example, your database. Very popular approach is to refactor DB2 onto RDS Postgres, right? Or to take applications that have had their code modernized into, say, Java or .NET, and using application engines such as Beanstalk, which creates scalability and new agility. The one thing that it does not address, however, is the logic of the application. The application logic does not change. The business logic does not change. But what we are changing, again, is we're refactoring the application, so that we are consuming the modern data platform services, for example, so that we can then begin to consume ML and build AI. So it's highly transformative, and certainly an approach that requires a big commitment. The next is a cloud native rebuild, and this requires the highest degree of commitment from our customers, because in these cases, this is where we're understanding the business logic and what that application code is doing for the business today, deconstructing that, and greenfield, or rewriting brand new cloud native applications to recreate that functionality. So we're very much consuming modern AWS services, things like Lambda, for example. However, it is a complete rebuild, requires, again, the biggest commitment from the business. This is again, complementary to our other modernization patterns, right? So as we go through our modernization, we may find that there are applications that we want to greenfield rewrite, and then we want to take other parts of our mainframe and perhaps emulate or just do a simple code modernization. So again, these are example modernization patterns. For as many that you see here, there are probably 5 or 10 more. It's no one size fits all, but it is our most common set of methodologies that we use today.
Yeah, Barry, a couple of questions on this topic in particular. So there's various tools on the market, and we have our own IP even as Atos with a set of a suite called Exit Legacy that can take COBOL and modernize it to Java, or kind of the quote JOBOL comments that people make, where you're still generally procedural in style, but it's now Java in nature, or full transformation to microservices. So some of our IP can help you actually deconstruct and reconstruct. How far can I get towards the finish line with all of the tools and the automation? I mean, it seems like maybe it should be push button easy sometimes, but what's the reality of how far those tools really get us in this game?
Boy, that's a super good question. The tooling gets us a long way, but there's a human element that has to be considered, and that's really, really important. So depending on the quality of the tooling, and I'm talking really around code modernization, for example, as an example, right? So as we think about code modernization and the tooling that automates that, the degree at which that automation occurs, again, is going to vary by tooling, but there's very much, as I said, a human element, because there's no tool out there that is going to fully QA and test and performance test and release that new code. There's a human element that's required for that. And also, I'm not aware of a case ever where all of the code base has been completely modernized at 100%. That just doesn't happen. And so it's that 1% or that code at the edge that is not transformed or modernized that does require a human touch. And for that part, that's where the experience of application developers is critical, because those are generally the most difficult parts of the code to modernize, and that's why you have to have that human element. The tools are they're critical, they're essential, but they cannot do it all. You have to have a highly skilled human element to actually complete that modernization program or that code modernization.
Yeah, great, thanks. And another follow-on question to that is, as I look at these 6 patterns, in theory, there's nothing that would prevent, 10 years ago, for example, have prevented a company from doing these things, doing it to an on-prem location, meaning fully rewrite an application and modern full stack Java and run it on an on-prem set of servers, or even stand up emulation on servers on-prem. So what now has changed? Like, why is this so much more an interesting and viable discussion to modernize and shut down these mainframes than it was 10 years ago?
Number one is the acute situation with mainframe skilled resources. Number one. So 10 years ago, we had more people. Secondly, the cloud environment is significantly different, has changed the IT and business landscape significantly, and it has created businesses with a snap of a finger who can move really, really quickly. It's been very, very disruptive. And so 10 years ago, we didn't have the cloud that we have today that moves at the speed of business and has the scale and the agility. It simply didn't exist. So it's difficult to compare, 10 years ago to today, because the cloud is so different. So the answer to the question really is it's skills, and it is the incredible transformation that modern cloud services like AWS have brought us.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. So why Atos? Why would any of our clients consider working with Atos for their mainframe modernization journey? First, it starts with our differentiators. And number one is our business alignment and our approach to working this as a business problem and a business solution, not just a technology challenge. Following that, we do have some very real differentiators. It starts with our application modernization capability in our practice. And we've got a tremendous amount of experience modernizing these legacy applications. And also, our cloud transformation practice is very adept at building the foundations and managing the migrations of these services into modern cloud. And then finally, and probably most importantly, is our heritage of mainframe infrastructure and hosting, of which we have a lot of experience. And if you look at the center of the slide, you can see we've got 40 plus years of very deep mainframe experience, and that's a really important part here. So that we understand to assure our customers that we do understand these landscapes and we know what it takes to support them, and of course to modernize those applications and move that data. In terms of additional capability, we do have our own IP. We've built and patented a number of tools that help us with application assessments and app modernization, data modernization, code modernization, et cetera. And we have quite an effective toolkit there to support that. And we also work with partners too, right? So it's not just Atos IP. It's a complementary blend, or it could be a complementary blend of Atos' own IP and working with some other vendors as well. Of course, none of this would be possible without the partnership with AWS. And it is really a tremendous partnership. We have a lot of creative and exciting projects that we work with AWS on in the mainframe space. And as I said, we do have a mainframe migration competency with AWS. So really happy about that. And finally, the recognition by the industry of Atos' credibility in this space is definitely well known. I would say that what we're proudest of most recently is the ISG recognition, wherein Atos was listed, or is the only global systems integrator, or GSI, in the world to have achieved leadership status in all 4 of their mainframe measurements. So we're particularly proud of that. So we do have a great deal of credibility in the mainframe space. With that, just a real brief success story from one of our recent clients. This was a top 5 credit card company in North America, and they had speed and agility challenges with their application to process credit card applications on their mainframe system. They reached out to us for help, and along with AWS, and we engaged with them to really redefine that application. And in fact, what we did is we adopted multiple modernization approaches, code modernization, refactor of data platforms, as well as cloud native application development to help this particular customer. And that's exactly what we did. So we essentially recreated all of the business functionality for the credit card application processing, which allowed this customer to, of course, process applications faster, but to deliver lines of credit faster and make them more competitive. The net result, outside of the speed and agility that this client now has and competitive stance to have, is the cost savings, which is $28 million TCO, I believe, in this case. So it was very, very considerable cost savings. These mainframe environments are obviously, as we said earlier, very expensive to maintain. So a really good success story. This is a recent one. We've got others, but we're particularly proud of this one. And again, everything that we did for this customer was brought into AWS. That brings us through all the material that we wanted to share today. We sincerely thank you for those of you who have stayed on for the duration of the video. Really appreciate it. We hope that we were able to help. Brad and I are here for any questions you may have. Find us at Atos or find us on LinkedIn, where we'd love to take your questions or have some follow-up conversations.